Hi folks, this is Tony for the A Minute to Midnight Show, and welcome to another episode of our show. I just want to say thank you folks for donating recently. A couple of weeks I've shared people that my wife Holly has been planning to come back to New Zealand, and we didn't have the money to get her back here, and obviously we run 100% by donations and there's a lot of expenses and things. I want to say a really big thank you to the folks that have been donating in the last 2 weeks, because donations had been really slow, but just since I told people about that, everyone has stepped up to the plate, a lot of people, and been so helpful. It's been amazing. So I want to say a big, huge thank you to the people that do donate. And of course, if anyone else does want to help pay our expenses through donating and so on, you can donate at our website, aminutetomidnight.com. And please make sure you subscribe to us there as well. And obviously, always it's nice if you will like and share our videos too. So today I have with me on the A Minute to Midnight show Leo Hohmann, and Leo's pretty much on the show monthly. And so it is really good to have you back today and basically talk about the developments, and there are so many of them going on, plenty of things that we can cover. So it's good to have you back, Leo.
Good to be back, Tony. Always a pleasure.
So, yes, since we were last on here, there's obviously been more developments. There's more developments with the whole tariffs and developments with the Ukraine and Russia situation. AI, more developments, how they're pushing it on children. And I mean, there's just so many things. And you've been writing about some of those. So I'll let you begin where you want to begin.
Well, I guess let's start with the Putin-Trump Alaska summit, which we're still seeing the reverberations of that summit play out, 3 or 4 weeks after the fact now. That was a historic meeting. It was something that Trump really wanted, because Trump loves he loves the pomp and circumstance of the office of the presidency. And we saw that in spades in Anchorage, where they rolled out the red carpet. They had the F-16s flying overhead. This was all a big public relations coup for the president to be meeting with Putin on U.S. soil, not in Moscow, not on a neutral location, but on U.S. soil with his counterpart in this, one of the two players he's trying to get to agree to end this war between Russia and Ukraine. And it really looked like it might happen. I think a lot of people expected some sort of ceasefire, at least, if not an outright settlement of the war, to happen after that summit took place. I think President Trump included expected that to happen. I think he expected to convince Putin to end the war. Well, nothing further from the truth. Putin has shown that he was actually playing Trump. Okay, he is not. It should have been evident if Trump had really done his homework and done the hard work of diplomacy leading up to that meeting. He probably would have never held the meeting, because he would have known that it would have ended without any sort of substantive agreement. Although he did get his public relations grandstanding in to make him look like the most powerful man in the world. So maybe he would do it all over again, even though he didn't get the ceasefire or the end to the war that he was seeking. However, it really proved how the U.S. Administration right now, they look for these big, grand wins in the public eye. Perceptions of wins are maybe even more important than wins themselves, okay?
Yeah.
And so it did look like a win when you've got Trump meeting the powerful president of Russia on U.S. soil, and all of the pomp and circumstance that went along with that. But now as the weeks and the days and the weeks are playing out, we're seeing really that Putin did not agree to anything really at that meeting that would box him into a corner and force him to give up the fight that's going on in Ukraine, which, by the way, is going very well for Russia right now. If Putin truly was losing as many men as the Western media tells us he's losing, he would be eager to end this war right now on Trump's terms. But because he's not losing the war and he's gaining more territory every day, and for every one Russian soldier lost, there's like 8 Ukrainian soldiers who are being killed. Because of that, he's sticking to his guns, and no pun intended, he's sticking to his original terms of what it will take to end the war. And that is neutrality for Ukraine, demilitarization as much as possible of Ukraine, no European troops ever on U.S. soil. And I think that's the big sticking point, actually. Trump gave him the guarantee that Ukraine would not join NATO. And in exchange for that...
You did say on US soil, you mean Ukrainian soil. There are bound to be people comment on that if I don't correct
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you for catching that verbal typo there. Yeah. Yes, no Western troops on Ukrainian soil. That's a biggie for Putin. In exchange for now, Trump did say Ukraine would never join NATO, and Putin did agree to some sort of vague security guarantee for Ukraine that did not involve NATO, or certainly did not involve the U.S., right? But that was never really spelled out in detail what that security guarantee amounted to. But Trump never... And of course, then there was these territorial swaps that were, I think, mostly agreed to, maybe not all of them. But the big sticking point is, okay, once we end the war, what does the peace look like? And Trump didn't have an answer for that, other than peacekeeping troops from European countries stationed in Ukraine, and that was a non-starter for Putin. So he's not going to stop fighting. Now Trump is looking like his bark is worse than his bite, and that he's issuing empty threats. Because what did he do? He gave Putin 2 weeks to agree to stop fighting and end the war. And if he did not, then he was going to levy what are called secondary sanctions on any country that traded in Russian oil. In other words, any country that buys Russian oil would no longer be able to do business with the United States. Okay? Well, the 2 weeks passed and Trump did nothing. And eventually he did. Oh, and he said that the tariffs would be 100%. 100% tariffs on any country that continued to buy Russian oil. They would have 100% tariffs on their goods coming into the United States. The 2 weeks pass. Nothing happens. A few more days pass, and he did do sanctions on one country, India. Trump refused to put the sanctions on China. China and India are the 2 biggest purchasers of Russian oil. And Russia uses the revenue it gets from these oil sales to China and India to fund its military, right? Which it needs right now to continue the war in Ukraine. Yeah. But Trump thought he could bully the weakest of those 2 parties, India, and the rest of the world would fall into line. He called their bluff, and he thought India would fall into line. He called India's bluff and China's bluff, and what happened? They doubled down. The 3 countries, India, Russia, and China, are now being driven together. This was all played out over the weekend at the Shanghai Cooperative Summit in China. The 3 leaders of those countries, China, Russia, India, were locked arm in arm, hand in hand, smiling, buddy. I mean, it looked like a love fest, okay? This is the nightmare scenario for the Trump administration. This means that all their policies driving towards isolating Russia and forcing Russia to the negotiating table to end this war in Ukraine have been a dismal failure. Instead of isolating Russia, they have shown that Putin, they always say, the Western media and the Western politicians, they always preface when they start talking about, the war in Ukraine, how successful it's been. They say Putin has been isolated by the sanctions and this, that. Putin did not look isolated in Shanghai, okay? It looked like he had a lot of friends.
Yeah.
And so it has exposed the Trump policy as a complete and utter failure because India is doubled down and said, we're not only not going to stop buying Russian oil, we're going to buy more Russian oil. And instead of selling our goods to the United States, which has hit us with a 50% tariff, China has agreed to buy more of our goods to make up most of the difference. Okay, because so that not only is the Russian economy not being crippled by U.S. sanctions, Western sanctions, but the Indian economy is also now not going to be crippled by U.S. sanctions. So it's almost like the emperor has no clothes now. The U.S. empire, which is, let's face it, on the wane, has been dealt a severe blow in China over the weekend by these three major economies, Russia, China, India, now being forced together by a I think, reckless tariff policy of the Trump administration. It's all backfiring, and I think the Trump administration is now in a panic of, oh my gosh, what do we do now? We've played most all of our cards, and we've gotten nothing for it.
So the other thing here is, of course, Zelensky, but he's already basically given, the idea that he's not prepared to give up the Crimea and Donbass and all that either. So he's dug his heels in as well. Yes. And then, of course, Putin's, I think, come out today or yesterday and said, if you want to talk, come to Moscow to Zelensky. Of course, he's not going to do that. But again, It's just like you have two sides here that have no intention of giving up anything.
No.
And so it's a mess.
No. But the problem is it will eventually lead to World War III if we continue on this path.
Yeah.
That is the problem. Yes. Because you're right. Both sides have dug in their heels. Trump has the problem that President Trump has is he's trying to serve too many masters. I think he honestly did want to end the war, and he honestly did think he could end the war when he was on the campaign trail and everything before the election. And he said that he could end it on day one in 24 hours simply by getting on the phone with Putin. I don't know if he believed it would be that easy, but I do believe he thought he could end it. But the problem is, he's got the European allies on the one hand who have no interest in ending the war and want to keep it going as long as possible because these Western European leaders are not very popular with their citizens. The longer they can blame the economic misery on Russia, the longer they can stay in power, right? And so they have no interest in ending the war. And I think they long term would like to go to war directly with Russia and see it subdivided into maybe 3 to 5 separate republics.
The problem is with Europe, though, is like even Germany, their weapons are in disarray. They don't have the weapons to fight a war. Like they've got a handful of tanks that are mostly broken down.
Nor do they have the troop strength.
Yeah,
troop strength.
Exactly.
I was just gonna say that. Yes. So they are really dependent on the U.S. weapon systems.
Yeah.
And they would be dependent if they're going to take on Russia in a world war. I believe they would also need some contingent of American troops on their behalf. I don't think, but on the flip side, I don't believe that Russia has any intention of marching, across to Berlin and taking Germany and then on to Paris to take France. This is all a fantasy of the Western politicians trying to make Russia sound like the next, make Putin out to be the next Hitler who wants to conquer all of Europe. That is not a reality. That is not. That is absolutely a false narrative. But it keeps the hatred, the anti-Russia hatred going among their own populations. It allows them to, continue to up the security measures and spend more on their military, which means less money on their social programs, right?
Yeah.
And some of that was needed. I believe I believe that the Europeans need to spend more on their own defense and rely less on the United States. The problem is they're addicted to the United States being their security blanket. And so I don't think anything's going to happen immediately or even very soon in terms of World War III direct, and some argue World War III is already underway, and I understand that argument, okay? So I'm not ignorant of that argument. But when I say World War III, I'm talking about direct combat between Western troops, Americans and Europeans, and Russians and or Chinese. Okay, that's what I'm referring to. And I think that will probably kick off sometime before the end of the Trump administration. Let's just say that. I don't think it's going to happen tomorrow, next week, or next month, but I think it is building towards that because President Trump, like I said, is trying to placate too many divergent interests. He stated that he wants to be the peace president, and I think he honestly did want to end this war. But he also has the Europeans to placate, which I've already talked about, and then he has the neocons here at home in Washington who want nothing more than to keep this war going and to actually at some point go into direct combat with Russia. These neocons in Washington are absolutely insane. I don't even want to try to figure out or explain what is going on in their heads because anyone who thinks that could end well, a direct war between the United States and Russia, is mentally ill, okay? There will be no winners if that happens.
Yeah, that's true. So just on the tariffs for a minute, you mentioned them before. I think a lot of people don't realize, a lot of Americans don't realize, the tariffs are hurting countries even like New Zealand, right? The 15%, and then they've levied some other tariffs so that recently 25 countries, including New Zealand, Australia, and Britain, have all stopped a postal service to the US. So you cannot send packages to the United States from, the main allies of the United States because all the postal services have to figure out how to incorporate these tariffs into everything. So at the moment, you can't send any goods to the United States via the postal services. So most people wouldn't know that, but all of that's going to be hurting America indirectly or slowly too. But it's definitely hurting countries like New Zealand and Australia.
This is why President Trump had his head handed to him on a plate with these threats, because he cannot put 50 or 100% tariffs on China like he threatened to do with the secondary tariffs. If China keeps buying Russian oil, he's going to hit them with 100% tariffs. That was nothing but utter smoke. He was blowing up the skirts of these people, okay? Because the moment that happens, China stops the ships coming to the port of LA and no more Chinese goods enter this country.
Yeah.
And that includes a lot of vital necessities, okay? It used to be it was just cheap Chinese plastic goods that you bought at Dollar General, but that is old news, okay? Over the last 10, 15 years, it has evolved. That trading relationship has evolved to include stuff like critical medicines, antibiotics, over-the-counter meds, ibuprofen, Tylenol, all includes ingredients that come from China. you know, not to mention all of the other things, hardware goods, you name it. It all comes from China. And so that was an empty threat. They called Trump's bluff, and he's now been exposed as blowing smoke. And so nobody really knows which threat of President Trump now is a serious threat or if it's just another empty threat. And I don't see how that can end well for the United States when the top government official of our country, when his word is no longer worth much. Okay. And like you said, it's affecting even some allied countries as well as adversarial countries. And China, even though it's an adversarial country, in terms of strictly business, you'd have to count it as an ally. If you're dependent for, X amount of your goods coming from a certain country, critical need goods, not just frivolous things, then how can that not be really an ally? This is the problem. We've gotten addicted to Chinese industry supplying our needs in this country, but then we want to turn around and treat them like an enemy. You can't have it both ways.
Yes, that's true. So another little point that people probably don't know is that New Zealand is offering people that come with that buy a $5 million house can get citizenship in New Zealand. And so that's increasing the number of rich Americans that are fleeing to New Zealand. But the thing is, they don't have to give up their US citizenship either, so they can have dual citizenship, New Zealand and the US, and then they can all run here. Buy up a big house, mansion, and then they can run here at the first sign of trouble. So that's another new development.
Yes.
So all of these things are interconnected, I think, because there are a lot of probably nervous people. So the other thing, just moving off from that, what about the covering? I call it soft martial law. City by city in the US, Washington, D.C., and then Chicago, and then where does this end?
Very good question, Tony. I mean, when President Trump announced his plan to federalize law enforcement in Washington, D.C., I had mixed feelings about that. I think legally he was covered on that because of the nature of Washington, D.C. It is not a state. It is a federal district. And there are laws in place that allow him to take over the law enforcement of that district. But I had a sneaky feeling, and my gut feeling turned out to be exactly right, that this was just a predicate to get people used to the idea of federal troops in a U.S. city. Start out in Washington, where it is constitutionally okay to do, but then to roll out the same model for other cities. And now he's doing it in Chicago and Baltimore. If a state's governor invited the federal troops to come in, maybe I could see it, him saying, we've got a big, huge crime problem in our major cities, and we're going to invite the National Guard in to help us with it. That's still questionable, in my opinion, because we have something called the Posse Comitatus law that goes back to 1890 or something, that does not allow federal troops to engage in state or local law enforcement. But if the governor and the mayor of the city agreed to it, that's bad enough, but okay, I could maybe see it. If you called it an emergency, right? And the local officials agreed to it. But that's not what Trump's doing. He's going into blue states with blue governors and blue mayors, totally against their wishes, and saying he's going to federalize their law enforcement. That is not only illegal, it's unconstitutional, and has no precedent that I'm aware of in U.S. history. This is major, and it is a form of soft martial law. My opinion, do I agree with the way these cities are run? Absolutely not. But the people did elect these buffoons to be their leaders.
Yeah.
Okay. They elect Pritzker to be J.B. Pritzker, the communist governor of Illinois and the communist mayor of Chicago. So, I feel bad for the people who did not vote for those communists, but our Constitution has something called federalism. It doesn't allow the federal government to just willy-nilly go in and invade the space of state and local jurisdictions and say, okay, we're in charge here now. That is not kosher by any stretch of the imagination, by anything in American constitutional law, culture, or history. I'm sorry. The only time something like that was done was during the American Civil War, and Abraham Lincoln did it, okay? And that was questionable even at the time, but what? The states were at war with each other,
Yeah.
so all is fair in love and war, right? You can get away with it.
Yeah.
But are we in a civil war right now? Maybe that's how we should take this. Maybe if Trump does this, that sparks civil war in this country. I don't know. It certainly bears close watching. I think Chicago could be a flashpoint for potential civil war in this country. And then if you got Baltimore and a couple of other cities, that just adds fuel to the fire. Or it could just be mostly smoke that Trump is blowing, and he won't really, again, he's a big talker.
Yeah.
How much of what he says will he actually do? That's what we need to watch. But if he does move federal troops and federal agents in en masse to some of these cities, I think we're playing with fire, and we're risking triggering something that we don't want in this country. Mass violence on a level of something similar to a civil war.
Yes, that's true, and you could see that potentially coming. So there's another subject I want to cover, which is the AI and all of that type of thing. So and for people in New Zealand, Amazon has just announced that they're going to be building one of those massive data centers in Auckland. $7.5 billion they're going to be spending. So New Zealand's getting them now as well. But you've written recently about AI and how they're using it to influence children. And, that was obviously always going to happen, but it's a huge can of worms and a very big problem, I think, because obviously AI is programmed by someone, and that we know is not going to be Christian programming. It's going to be something sinister and nefarious that they're going to be using to indoctrinate kids through toys and various other things.
100%. Melania Trump just announced she has a new assignment to roll out some sort of national contest promoting AI in the schools, K through 12. They're going to have, like, you can win $10,000 if you, come up with some great use for AI. It's basically going to get students and educators involved in AI more so than they already are. And I think they're already up to their ears in it. So this administration is 100% behind AI with the youth and promoting AI among the youth as a wonderful thing. I'm not opposed maybe teaching children about AI, but I think to teach them that AI is this, all-encompassing, wonderful thing for humanity that's going to benefit us all and improve our lives, I think that's a mistake. I think it should be taught with a caveat that, okay, this could be used for some legitimate purposes, but it's also very dangerous, and you need to beware of your involvement with it because there's been some very serious breaches already in which AI has told a 14-year-old to kill himself. Have you heard about that?
Yeah, I have. I haven't really followed it closely, though.
A 14-year-old boy killed himself on the advice of artificial intelligence. Some former, I think, Yahoo executive. Don't hold me to that, but he was the executive of some major company, CEO, he also has done a similar thing, and you would think he would know better. But I think all of this needs to be highlighted as well when you're teaching children about not just the good of AI, but the dark side of AI. That's not what Melania is doing. It's going to be presented as a wonderful, game-changing, earth-moving technology that can improve our lives and make us all happy. And there's AI companies that are now propping up as promoting themselves as your emotional support. Okay, you've got people leaning towards AI for their emotional support, and companies profiting off of that. How can that have a good outcome? It's all sorts of dangerous things. You've got AI in cars spying on drivers, and sending their data back to a central computer. You're going to have AI in the smart homes, in the smart cities. All of it is one big, massive data collection and data analysis, and eventually social credit scoring system. That's what it's all geared towards. In the end, it's going to be a social credit system that forces people to obey the state or suffer consequences. Like in China, they have this system already, and that's what they want to install here. The problem is you can't just do it overnight like in a dictatorship like in China. You have to use propaganda. The power of propaganda is what is used in the Western countries, especially America, to get people to want to use and enable this technology in their lives. Okay, we've even had, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who I kind of like, but I've lost some respect for him because I think he's also involved in this, where he's telling Americans they need to have these, what he calls wearables, watches, wristbands, earbuds, medical attachments to their body, use wearables to monitor and track everything they eat, their exercise habits, blah, blah, blah. It's just all one huge data monitoring program. And that's what is eventually going to be turned against us. But right now they're in the propaganda phase of the operation where it hasn't been really fully weaponized yet. They're just trying to convince everybody of how wonderful it is and that we should voluntarily hook up to this thing and use it in our everyday lives. Don't do it, folks. Avoid it at all cost because it will eventually be turned against you. I can guarantee that.
Absolutely. And then I'm thinking of children, and I think Mattel is,
Yes,
you've written about that too, have you? Yeah.
Mattel has signed, Mattel, the largest toy maker in America, has signed a partnership agreement with OpenAI, one of the biggest AI companies in the world, and they're going to be incorporating AI into their toys.
Yes. So you imagine the kids, kids being educated by a Barbie or a Ken doll or something with AI.
Right.
From a little,
and their parents will be completely oblivious and even think it's if they're even aware of it, they'll think it's a good thing unless they're educated by people like us. Okay. There's very few people out there right now warning parents, warning children about the dark side of AI. I mean, the information is out there. I mean, it's like you have to look for it. It's not being discussed or paraded on the major, news channels or Fox News or CNN or major websites. You just don't see it. You have to go looking for it. So I'm hoping that, we can get people to listen to us because there's very few people out there sounding the alarm.
Yes, and it is really happening so quickly. All of these transhumanist type agendas and with the AI and all of that. It's just the advancements are so rapid, and they're throwing such huge money at these things, and basically everything will be tracking and tracing all of us, and that's happening,
that's
almost in real time, now.
That's what it's all about. And there's also a lot of hoodwinking going on with the CBDCs, central bank digital currencies. They need these they need to digitize the money because the U.S. paper fiat dollar is getting ready to collapse. It's already lost 35% of its value over the first 7 months of this year, 8 months now. But they talk about gold reaching record levels of value,
yeah.
right? It's up over $3,500 an ounce. Well, the value of gold is the value of gold. It doesn't change. What is changing is the dollar is losing value. So it takes more dollars to buy that same ounce of gold. People don't understand that. It's not like gold is skyrocketing in value. Gold is the same value today as it was last week, last month, or last year. But it now takes hundreds of more dollars to buy that same ounce of gold. Why? Because the US dollar continues to lose value. And that is a trend that I think you're going to see speed up and continue over the Trump presidency. Number one, he's pushing for lower interest rates, which seems like a good thing, but that also escalates the devaluation of the dollar. So, because we've got this $37 trillion debt hanging over our heads. And when you've got debt like that, it's even more devaluing to the currency to, just print more money but through lower interest rates.
Yeah.
And now you've got these countries ganging up against America because they feel like America has abused its status as having the world's reserve currency, using that really privilege of having the U.S. dollar as the world's currency by slapping sanctions on this country, that country that we may or may not agree with some of their policies. So we threaten them with sanctions, economic sanctions. Well, that might work for a while, and it did. But now I think in light of the Ukraine-Russia war, the world has seen that you can survive living under U.S. economic sanctions. Why? Because Russia has shown the world that it is possible. And now India is in the same boat. India is being hit with these huge tariffs, and it is now forming a closer relationship with its former enemies like China, and making a better relationship with a former ally in Russia. So it's going to also show the world that, hey, you can do this. The almighty hegemon, the United States of America, that has been the controller of the world order. It's been a world order since the end of World War II that's been dominated by one country, the United States. That is now coming to an end, and we're moving towards what they call a multipolar world order. And how is that coming to pass? The United States has kicked its own self in the face by overusing and weaponizing its status, overusing sanctions, economic sanctions, and abusing its status as the world reserve currency. And now these other countries are saying, you know what, we can do without the dollar. We can trade in our own local currencies. We can stop investing in the dollar. We can stop buying U.S. treasuries so that, now the U.S. government can't print as much money as easily as it did before because China, Russia, Japan, countries that used to maybe buy U.S. treasuries are no longer doing it. And China, which was the biggest one, is actually cashing in a lot of its U.S. treasuries. So it's getting harder and harder to fund that debt and continue acting as the world's policeman, that fulfilling that role that the United States has held since the end of World War II. And you could make a strong argument that we have no one to blame more than our own selves because we've abused that privilege and tried to impose our political will on sovereign countries when it wasn't warranted. And now it's being exposed as well. Maybe this hegemon, this global superpower, does not have as much power over us as we thought. And we can do business with these other superpowers. Russia is ascending. China is ascending. Now India is ascending. And so there's this coalition building as an alternative to the U.S. dollar and the U.S. economic leadership of the world.
Yeah, you mentioned gold. Of course, the other one is silver, and both of those are
Yeah.
moving up rapidly. I think they've got a long way to go yet. I don't think they're anywhere near where they're going to end up at. I think we're only on the beginning of
I
a
agree.
big run up. But the other thing about that is China, India, and Russia are three of the biggest holders of gold in the world and have been getting more and more of it in recent years. And we don't really know how much China's got. I think a lot more than what they're saying. But all those three countries are very gold orientated. And then you had, the Musk and Trump were promising to audit Fort Knox, and that went silent. So we don't even know how much gold's in Fort Knox, if any.
I couldn't wait for Trump and Musk to go to Fort Knox and tell me how much gold was in there. But suddenly that story dropped off the news cycle. Fox News was reporting it. And then all of a sudden, gone. Nobody would talk about it again.
Something's odd, strange.
Very, very, very suspicious. Yeah.
Okay.
I think we got our answer as to how much is in there.
Probably, yes. Probably, or not much. Maybe a bunch of gold-painted blocks of wood or something. Yeah. But anyway, okay, so we may as well look to wrap up. Any closing thoughts you have, you can give us, and also just let people know where they find your writing online.
Yeah, I would just say keep your eye on this Russia-Ukraine war. People got bored of following it. People thought, oh, it's just another war. But I've always thought that this was going to be the area of the world that, along with, Israel and the Middle East, that would trigger World War III. That same area, Eastern Europe, is what triggered World War I, World War II. And I think it's going to trigger World War III. And just be prepared. Oh, and another thing, just yesterday it was announced by France, the French government, that they have ordered their hospitals to prepare. Did you see that story where the French hospitals have been ordered to prepare for mass influx of wounded soldiers?
Oh, wow.
By March of 2026, they said that the hospitals need to be ready for these mass influxes of wounded civilians and soldiers, predominantly soldiers, because we are heading potentially for war with Russia in Europe. So now that's a scaremongering tactic, or a propaganda tactic on the behalf of the French government, no doubt about that, because Macron, along with Starmer in the UK, is just a frothing at the mouth neocon wanting war with Russia. And so the only way to do that and prepare the people for it is to fearmonger and scaremonger them into believing that Russia is wanting to conquer all of Europe, and it could happen within the next 6 months. And so our hospitals need to get ready for it. There's that aspect of it, okay? But then there is also the other aspect that sometimes these become self-fulfilling prophecies, right?
Yeah.
If you talk about war with Russia long enough and scaremonger your people about it long enough, eventually it may happen, okay? And so I don't think it's going to happen by March of next year. That's just my opinion. It could. But I think it could happen, like I said earlier, by the end of the Trump administration, maybe 2027. Mark that down, that we could be in World War III with Russia, and potentially, and that means with China as well, by the end of 2027. Now, I just have a gut feeling. I could be totally wrong on this, but that's my feeling. So I say keep your eye on this war. Don't let your guard down, and get prepared mentally, physically, and spiritually.
Yep, obviously the spiritual preparation is really important. People need to know Christ Jesus and to basically have our eyes on him. So, Leo, to close up, where do people find your writings online?
On my Substack account, you can sign up for free, my articles for free. You can also help me out by getting a paid subscription. I don't require that to read my material because I want it to get to as many people as possible. But that is what I depend on to keep me going, is the paid subscription. So if you can afford, I think it's $7 a month or $80 a year, take your pick. then please, by all means, do that and help me keep going. But if you can't afford it, just sign up for a free subscription and you will get my Substack posts. I'd say on average, maybe 2 or 3 articles a week. You can also go to my website, leohohmann.com, for some more articles there. Again, they're free. But I'm open to donations. I have a donate button through Give, Send, Go on leohohmann.com on all my articles there. But again, only if you can afford it. So thank you so much for the opportunity to talk to your audience, Tony, on a monthly basis. I really appreciate that and the work that you're doing.
Thank you. And we covered so much today. I think a lot of really important information and a lot that people wouldn't have known probably too. So thank you so much. It's been a great discussion. I've really enjoyed it and found it very helpful.
Absolutely. Thank you, Tony. I appreciate it.
Cheers.
God bless.